a wonderful opportunity to get together. Any excuse is a good excuse, but Sunday somehow feels like a special day of celebration. We'll begin our satsang today with a chant, have a prayer together, and then take another chant into a brief meditation before we begin our satsang on will versus willingness. So let's begin by setting an intention for our chanting to be especially conscious not only of the words that we're singing, but the feeling behind the words and adding our own feeling to those. The chant can do a little bit on its own, but it does exponentially more when we add our energy to it. Night has flown, dawn has come. Wake, my children, wake. Wake, my children, wake. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Night has flown, dawn has come. Wake, my children, wake. Wake, my children, wake. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Night has flown, dawn has come. Wake, my children, wake. Wake, my children, wake. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Night has flown, dawn has come. Wake, my children, wake. Wake, my children, wake. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Night has flown, dawn has come. Wake, my children, wake. Wake, my children, wake. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Night has flown, dawn has come. Wake, my children, wake. Wake, my children, wake. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Night has flown, dawn has come. Wake, my children, wake. Wake, my children, wake. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Sitting in the asana of meditation. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Thinking of that Guru's lotus feet. Night has flown, dawn has come. Wake, my children, wake. Wake, my children, wake. Sitting in the asana of meditation, sitting in the asana of meditation, thinking of my Guru's lotus feet, thinking of my Guru's lotus feet. Night has come, dawn has come. Wake, my children, wake. Wake, my children, wake. Sitting in the asana of meditation, sitting in the asana of meditation, thinking of thy Guru's lotus feet, thinking of thy Guru's lotus feet. Night has gone, dawn has come. Wake, my children, wake. Wake, my children, wake. Sitting in the asana of meditation, sitting in the asana of meditation, thinking of my Guru's lotus feet, thinking of my Guru's lotus feet, thinking of my Guru's lotus feet. Thinking of my Guru's lotus feet. Let's take the energy awakened inside each of us now and bring it into a prayer. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, friend, beloved God, great masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashai, Swami Shri Yukteswar, and our Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, saints and sages of all traditions, joyfully we bow before you all. Great masters, help us to learn from your example the right way to live. Train our thoughts to think only of thee. Train us to act in alignment with thy will. Teach us to love with your love. We are only here to know thee. Help us remember. Help us remember. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Take this chant into our meditation. This is door of my heart. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me. Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me? Wilt thou come, just for once come to me? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me? Wilt thou come, just for once come to me? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me? Wilt thou come, just for once come to me? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Take that quality of the heart that's been awakened by opening the door, and in this meditation, brief as it is, let's consciously allow God's joy, love, her power to enter that open door of our heart. If we are open, she will come. Meditate for about 8 minutes. while remaining in a calm, meditative state. Let's listen to these words by Swami Kriyananda on the topic of gratitude. Gratitude is a way of returning energy for energy received. Only a thief takes without paying for what he gets. And one who accepts a kindness without returning gratitude, as though the kindness were his by right, demeans both the giver and himself. He demeans the giver because by ingratitude he implies that the kindness was inspired by selfish motives. And he demeans himself because by giving nothing in return, he breaks the cycle of creativity, without which prosperity's flow, both materially and spiritually, is blocked. Accept nothing inwardly for yourself, but offer everything to God. Don't let yourself be bought by others' kindnesses. Be grateful to them above all in your soul by blessing or praying for them. Give gratitude first of all to God, for whom alone all blessings truly come. Now we'll do an affirmation together, bringing our full energy, our interest, and our gratitude. Repeat loudly after me. I give thanks to the giver behind each gift.
I give thanks to the giver behind each gift.
And to the one giver behind all that I receive.
And the one giver behind all that I receive.
My gratitude rises with devotion's incense.
My gratitude rises with devotion's incense.
To the throne of omnipresence.
To the throne of omnipresence.
A little more softly. I give thanks to the giver behind each gift.
I give thanks to the giver behind each gift.
And to the one giver behind all that I receive.
And to the one giver behind all that I receive.
My gratitude rises with devotion's incense.
My gratitude rises with devotion's incense.
To the throne of omnipresence.
To the throne of omnipresence.
Even more softly, I give thanks to the giver behind each gift. And to the one giver behind all that I receive. My gratitude rises with devotion's incense. To the throne of omnipresence. Finally, silently repeating these words with deep conviction, I give thanks to the giver behind each gift, and to the one giver behind all that I receive. My gratitude rises with devotion's incense to the throne of omnipresence. Please pray silently with me. I thank thee, Lord, for all thy blessings, but most of all, I thank thee for thy love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Cool. Good morning, everyone. So today's topic is will versus willingness. And this is one of my favorite topics, the idea of willpower. I was raised, as you might be able to tell, in the United States, in the West. And in that country, we have no problem believing that willpower is an important quality. This is not something that is lost on us. In fact, I think if we were to try to define our national identity, it would be that if you want something, you can put out the energy to make it happen. And this is actually a very high principle. But there's a balance. So I work with children usually. I work in Education for Life, which is a philosophy on working with children and teaching them that was pioneered by Paramahansa Yogananda and then his disciple Swami Kriyananda. And in Education for Life, we have 4 tools of maturity that we work with. These are the 4 tools that go into making a person, helping them to grow into whoever it is that they're supposed to be. And one of these is will, along with the body, the feelings, and the intellect. Now, there's an interesting aspect here, which is that the body and the will have a more outward expression. So if we're talking about willpower, we usually think about, I can do it. If I put out energy, I can make it happen. I can start a business. I can climb the mountain. I can do whatever I need to do just through the expenditure of energy. And similarly for the body, we can think, okay, this is a more outward thing. We're learning to walk, we're learning to run, we're learning to coordinate ourselves. Similarly, or conversely, feeling and intellect maybe feel a little more inward. The feeling is sort of our emotional state, it's inside, how are we feeling, how are we doing? And the intellect the same way, what are we thinking, what's going on inside? And interestingly, these actually correspond with cycles within our astrological chart. This is not something I know a lot about, but I've noticed that for the first 6 years, we find ourselves in what we call the body years. This is the time when we're figuring out how this thing called our body works. And we're learning to crawl, then we're learning to walk, we're putting everything in our mouths, and we're learning about the world through our physicality. But as we grow, you can see also maybe an inward aspect to the body. Maybe we learn resilience from the body, from being able to be physically endurant, we learn how to be strong in difficult times. And from I won't go to the will yet. And then from the feeling and the intellect, we can see the opposite is also there. A well-balanced feeling nature actually helps us understand others. It helps us relate to other people. Similarly with the intellect, maybe we have ideas that happen inside, but that ability to communicate those ideas can be outward. So in all of these qualities, there's sort of an outer reality and an inner reality. And the balance between those is actually what gives us that inspiration, that ability to understand and learn from the world. And at the end of the day, the whole point of all of this is to be able to expand ourselves, to be able to identify with more and more until eventually we identify with everything. That's one definition for samadhi, is understanding that you are no longer, you never were actually this little ego, this one self, but you actually are one with everything. So the same is true actually for willpower. So willpower has that outer element, but there's also an inner element, and that is the element of willingness. So when we talk about will and how to apply it and then how to balance it with willingness, we have to consider the fact that will is a dynamic thing, but we actually think that we have a little bit more control than we do. So if I were to ask the question, do we have free will? And I won't get into the full definition of that yet, because that's sort of a question that you can spend eons on. Do I have control over what I do? Do I have control over what I say? Do I have control over what I think? But I'd rather pick it up from a slightly different thread, which is, are the things that happen to us preordained? Is it already written? Now, many of you know, especially here in India, that there are books that have been written that detail the lives of many people. There's the book of Brigu, there's a book of Agastya, and in these books, they detail the lives of individuals. You can go there, perhaps some of you even have, find your name, and it will tell you with great detail everything that happens in your life. Now, for those of us who haven't gone, that's a little bit hard even to relate to, because today I chose to wear this kurta, right? I chose to wear blue instead of red. That's actually a lie, my wife chose. But she chose to have me in blue instead of red. So there was a choice. She had the different options. She could have done whatever she wanted, and she chose blue. But in these books, in these texts, you see things about your past, but you also see things about your future. And I know people personally who have seen things that ended up happening to them contained in these books. But for us, let's try to depersonalize a little bit and look a little objectively at our own lives. Every one of us has had an experience where we wanted something. And every one of us has had an experience where we got that thing. And every one of us has had an experience where we have not gotten that thing. And yet, when we reflect, and this is one of the key things about understanding this balance, is we have to reflect. We have to actually watch our lives. We can't just go on autopilot. But when you reflect, at the end of everything, generally, everything has worked out for the best. There's a lovely story about a king, some of you might have heard, who, while hunting with his advisor, he accidentally shot off his thumb. And his advisor's mantra was, everything works out for the best. So he said his mantra, everything works out for the best. And the king had just lost his thumb, blood everywhere, probably can see bone. And he's saying, how can you say this? He flies into a rage. He casts the advisor in the dungeon for saying everything happens for the best. I've lost my thumb. This is terrible. Later on, the advisor is still in prison. The king goes hunting again, but this time he's captured by a group of cannibals. And they're getting ready. They're doing their process and ceremony for eating this delicious king. And then one of them notices he's missing a thumb. And well, we can't offer an imperfect offering to our God and before we eat, so they let him go. And the king goes back and he's completely, his mind is blown. It's like, the advisor was right. Everything does work out for the best. If I had had my thumb, I would have been eaten. And he goes back and he releases him from prison and he goes to talk to him, rushes to him and says, I'm so sorry, you were right. Everything works out for the best. But how about for you? You've been stuck in this prison for the last years because of one thing you said to me. How has this worked out for the best for you? And the advisor says, well, when you go hunting, I always go with you. And I would have also been captured by the cannibals, and I have both of my thumbs. So if we, now most of us don't have quite as dramatic an experience. I've not yet been captured by cannibals. But I think if we introspect, we can see in our lives, everything has worked out for the best. The successes and the challenges. I remember actually very recently, I've been working in a project in the NCR in education. And there's 3 different schools that we were thinking of working with. And they were very different. It was kind of like Goldilocks. One was a very, nice school, very progressive, very nice facilities, beautiful grounds. One was a government-aided school. It also was nice and had nice grounds, but it was in a different economics set. And then there was one sort of in the middle. And I had really wanted to work with the nicest school, in part because the teachers there were already a little bit more receptive to the kinds of things we would share in Education for Life. And it seemed like that's where things were going. And I just came back from a trip and I was all ready to go work there. And we show up and we have a meeting in the middle school, which was the only of the 3 schools that I didn't think we should start with. And I was a little bit surprised, but I decided through grace perhaps to let it go and just accept and see what it is. And what's very interesting is as it developed, as we spoke about it, as we met the teachers who were there, I hadn't seen them in years, it became very clear to me that this actually was the exact school that I was supposed to be in. Now the question comes, in this situation, I had already exerted my willpower in order to make this happen. I had given arguments for why we should go to the other school. I'd talked with people, I'd networked, I thought I'd massaged the situation suitably that I would get what I wanted. But it didn't work that way. Now, luckily, I had the willingness to say, okay, let's see what's trying to happen here. The inner will to say, let's find out if this is right. And in fact, we will still find out, but I already have seen, just by speaking with the teachers, by getting to be at this school, there are a lot of reasons why this is right. And that's because God, or the universe even, has a better view than us. We can see about this much, but there's a much greater reality out there for us. And we can't see that part of the story. So we use our willpower to sort of pursue what we think is right, but it may not be right. And so this is the trick of willpower. This is the dichotomy, because we do have to will. We have to put out energy. We have to act. Yogananda said one of the highest prayers is, I will reason, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right thing in all. And that's because we have to do something. If we just sat here and did nothing and waited for the world to come to us, you just die sitting on the floor. So we are compelled to act. Yogananda actually said that in this age of rising energy, it is necessary that our spiritual development actually comes from our willpower, our action. But what kind of will is it? Going back to the example of the beginning, growing up in America, they have an incredible amount of willpower. People are making things happen left and right. And yet, when I walk down the streets, I am not overwhelmed by saints. I am not completely bombarded by people who have achieved that realization. So why is it? Because there's our will, and then there's a higher will. That is the will of God, the will of Divine Mother, the will of the universe. And our job is to align in some way with that. I'll give another example. This was an accidental act of willingness. Early on, I met Swami Kriyananda, and we were there in Pune, and we had to take ourselves from India to Europe to film these programs. And so we had a 8-foot backdrop, 8-foot tall backdrop that we used. There's a beautiful picture of the Himalayas made of canvas, not light. And it was stored in a tube. And as I was leaving to catch my flight, I was going ahead of him, and I had a 2-week backpacking trip that was going to happen in Spain that I was really looking forward to. And as I was leaving, Swami said, "Oh, could you take the backdrop with you?" Now, at this point, I just had my backpack because I was having to travel, and I was backpacking. I was walking long distances. I didn't know what Spain would take. Everything that I had could fit on my shoulders. And then he's asking me to take this like 25-pound, 8-foot tall cylinder of canvas. Now, there was an interesting thing about being with Swamiji, which was that I was incapable of saying no. It wasn't that I felt guilty or I felt like I should say yes because this is Swami Kriyananda. It didn't even occur to me. How could I even think to say it? So I said yes. And then as I left and walked, and this tended to be the case, as I went farther and farther from his physical proximity, I would start to become more and more myself. And then I was holding this large tube. I was like, I'm about to just go walking around with this massive heavy tube. Like it's going to be me romantically backpacking in the hills of Spain, just my backpack and my large tube. But I said, okay, I've already said yes, here we go. So we went on, and I got to the airport, I checked it, I arrived in my next destination, and I hear my voice over the loudspeaker. I'm like, this is never good. It's never good to hear your voice announced at the airport. They're never like, oh, you won a prize. They're like, no, we lost something, or you aren't allowed in our country or something. So I went there, and they said, oh, we're so sorry, sir, but we lost your tube. And I was like, oh no, this was the one thing I have to bring. We can't record programs without it. It's this whole thing. And I was about to sort of I was a bit shell-shocked. I didn't know what to say. And they said, where would you like us to ship it when we find it? And then it clicked in. I had been willing to take the tube, but all that God wanted for me was to accept that there was something larger going on. And so what ended up happening is they found the tube while I was backpacking on my own through Europe. They sent the tube to where I was going, and all I had to do was pick it up on my way to Assisi to meet Swami. Now, these are small examples, but I think in all of our lives, we can find those examples where either we willed something to happen or we willed something not to happen. But at the end of the story, somehow we got to a good place. We got to the place where everything worked out for the best. Now, part of this, though, is as we go along and we try to develop our willingness, we still require that balance. Because if we just throw out willpower and go all the way to willingness and just say, I'm going to flow with Brahma, I'm going to flow with life, everything's going to happen for me, it doesn't always work out. We have to actually bring our own experience, our own wisdom to it. And that is the combination of will and willingness. I was up in, like I said, NCR earlier, and I have this great love of riding on motorcycles. I developed it here When I first landed, a friend and I, Shurjo actually, took a ride from Pune all the way to Delhi on a motorcycle. And it's a beautiful, heart-opening experience for me. But, so I've gotten in this habit of wherever I go, I'm always like, where can I find 2 wheels to ride? Is this an opportunity? Is that an opportunity? So I was up there, I was free on the weekend. I said, Cello, let's go find a motorcycle. So I found one. And one of my favorite things about riding on it is the freedom. You know, when you're on the bike, if you just see something you want to explore, you just go. And I've gone off-roading, I've ridden through the desert where there's no road, lots of amazing experiences. And part of that is that kind of feeling of freedom. I think we're all chasing that freedom, and we all find it in different ways. So I had gone out, and I had found this rocky road, and I was like, I'm just going to go and go and go. But there was a thought in the back of my mind, because I had just discovered that Neem Karoli Baba has an ashram in Delhi, and I had visited it the day before, and it was a really powerful experience for me. It was actually a very, very deep place. And so I was like, maybe I should go there. I only have a few hours. Maybe I should just go there. I was like, no, I said I'm going to adventure. I'm going to follow through. I'm going to use my will. This is the time to act. So I start going out, and it's crumbly rocks and sharp rocks, and the bike is also a little bit funky, and I think it might die at any moment. So this is the perfect, adventure to test my freedom. And I'm spinning out. I'm going up and up. And this thought just starts to come more and more clearly into my mind that, what is freedom, actually? Am I at the point where I still need this kind of activity in order to feel free? Or does freedom actually come from pursuing the things that feed me inside? And I struggled with that thought for about 25 minutes as I continued to go up. But eventually I realized this was appropriate for me at one point. It was appropriate for me to use my will in this way, to go out and adventure. But this is actually no longer mine. And so then the expansive thing became, I have to go back. So I ended up going to the ashram, and it was a lovely experience. I was only there for about 10 minutes because I had wasted so much time on my adventure. But even then, the lesson that I took from it was powerful, which was, we have to keep checking in. We have to study our lives and realize where we are. What worked for us yesterday may not work for us today. And so in that, I still had to use my willpower, but the tense aspect of my willpower was taking me outward. But the willing aspect of my willpower, the willing to hear that whisper in the back of my mind that's saying, actually, you were made for more than this. You don't need to go there. You don't need that kind of adventure. The adventure is inside now. The willingness that came that allowed me to say yes to that. Now, there are a couple more aspects I want to just share a little bit about, because willingness, the willpower aspect can feel a little tense. And so sometimes getting into willingness is a little bit tough. So I want to talk a little bit about the willingness to have fun. Swami Kriyananda was once asked, what is the purpose of Ananda? And he famously gave multiple answers to this, because in any given moment, there are multiple answers. But in this one particular one, he said, the purpose of Ananda is to have fun. And why? Now, fun has many different definitions. But true fun, when we're truly absorbed in something that brings us joy, there's a self-forgetfulness that happens. A friend of mine recently made a song, and it has no practical spiritual purpose. It is a very silly song, but he produced it really, really well. He's a music guy, and he has like the software where you can do beats and have like a little guitar riff going on and loop it all together. And I've heard sometimes people say, oh, there's this phrase that I really don't always like. It's, oh, you have too much time on your hands. If you're able to do something like this, you have too much time. And I want to lay out a counter possibility, which is sometimes it is true, you have too much time. But sometimes the willingness to do something that's a little bit outside of the box, but that brings you joy, is actually a key part of remembering why we're here. Because willingness is what brings us actually to the end. It's what allows us to forget that we have an objective here. We have a desire. I want to see this, this, and this happen. So when we have fun, when we have that joyful element, we actually allow ourselves to get out of the way. It kind of gives us the freedom to say, actually, I'm going to focus on joy right now. So there are times to share that willpower, to say, I have to do this. But remember, we have to bring a balance. We have to say, these two things actually work together. If I'm ever too willful without the willingness, I'll get out of balance. Whenever I'm too willing, it becomes watery. I need to apply a little willpower. The last aspect I wanted to share about is that of the willingness, how would I say, to be loved. Now, this is something that occurred to me. It's why we chanted Door of My Heart today. But there's a book of Yogananda, a collection of his sayings, and it's how to love and be loved. And I think about that a lot. It is fairly, I won't say easy, but I think it's easier to love. I think it's easier to give love for a lot of people and not as easy to receive love. But this is actually the core, because love, the love of the universe, is constantly trying to infiltrate us. It's actually trying to break into our heart. I had an experience once in the temple in Ananda Assisi, and I was sitting there and I was really struggling. I was really focusing. I was like, I'm going to get there. I'm going to do Hong Sa. I'm going to just reach out and grab divine favor for me. I'm going to have that experience. And I think you can tell from the tone of my voice, it didn't go well. I felt completely cut off. I was sitting there. I was practically sweating from the effort. And I had this thought just kind of snuck in. What if you relax? What if you don't try to push out, but you just kind of open? And it was like almost like the water from a waterfall just, whoom, it just hit me. It just completely washed me away instantaneously. And I realized in that moment that I had been doing my very best to use my will, actually not on purpose, but I was holding away. I was pushing it all away. And the moment that I was willing to say, I'm going to be open. Willingness is openness. It's the desire to allow the gifts of the universe to come to us, because God's plan is always better than ours. It just is. We can't imagine the best thing, the amazing things that could come to us if we were able to completely get out of the way. So I want to just take a moment to end with a bit of an experience. So we'll sit up straight. Close our eyes, and thinking of the chant, Door of My Heart, let's visualize first that all around us, visualize it even physically, all around us, there is this grace, there is this love that is trying to break in. The entire universe is made of this love. The only place where it can't be directly perceived all the time is in our hearts. As we feel and see that almost pressure of that love trying to get in, it's consciously, deliberately open a door in your heart. You may correspondingly even open your chest a little more. Allow that flow, that love to come in. Try to relax yourself completely. What may start off as a trickle, try to expand it into a torrent. Allow yourself to be flooded. That love is always there. It's up to us to be willing to allow it to come. So that we can then share it with all. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. We'll now have an arati. And get all drunk away. And get all drunk away. Get all drunk away. Sing my name, I will drink again. Get all drunk away. Invite each of you as you feel to come up to the altar and bring the light of God, the light of the benevolent universe into your heart and into your soul. Let's end our service with a prayer together. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, friend, beloved God, great masters, may thy light shine forever at the sanctuary of our devotion, and may we be able to awaken thy love in all hearts. Om Shanti. Thank you all for joining us. Have a blessed Sunday.